Hello, I'm Kevin Anderson. I'm the intern pastor here at Love of Christ Lutheran Church, and I'll be preaching this Sunday, the 26th Sunday after Pentecost. And we're going to take a brief look at the first reading for this Sunday, which comes out of the book of Daniel. Just a little bit of brief background on Daniel. Daniel is a prophet, a book of prophets, and he's a major prophet. In his time, he was writing somewhere in the year 600 to 550, maybe 500 BCE, during the Babylonian exile. And Daniel's a major prophet not because of the content of the book, but because of the length of the book. We also have some familiar stories for many of us that are found in the book of Daniel. You get the fiery furnace, you get Daniel in the lion's den, and if you come to our children's musical, which is taking place next Sunday, you will get a front row seat to the stories that are captured in the book of Daniel in a very fun way. So I do encourage you to come for that. It'll be at a 9 o'clock service next week, and you'll see firsthand reenactment of what goes on in the book of Daniel. Chapters 1 through 6 of Daniel, considered more historical, less prophetic kind of language that you hear. And then you get into chapters 7 through 12, and you get into visions, and you hear about animals, and all these kinds of things that take place. And our text comes from the 12th chapter of Daniel. Fits right in with the prophetic language, and you'll hear that in the text as we read it. So, just a little bit of setting this up. In chapter 9, Daniel's living towards the end of the prophesied time that the exile would end. It had been 70 years, and so he opens one of the prophetic books, and he hears that exile is not over. In fact, this time is going to be extended immensely, 70 times 7 years. So the point of this is that we're not looking for specific dates. We can't do a math equation or read the sky and figure out exactly when this is going to happen, but it's an indication that exile is not over. And Daniel's very, very troubled when he reads this. And so this is in the midst of his prophetic language, and the language you find kind of before chapter 12. You have these 4 animals that represent 4 kingdoms that are surrounding, and it's all an indication that more exile is to come. But as we know with the prophets, there is this declaration of judgment that is happening. There is a suffering that will happen in life, but there is also a message of hope. And we get a glimpse of that in chapter 12, where Daniel is having this vision, and this vision ends with an arrogant king coming to ruin, which connects to our gospel text as well. But all of this is pointing to what God is going to do. God is not going to abandon Israel. God is not going to leave them in suffering, but God promises to be with them, and God promises to bring about the reign of God, the opposite of what is going to happen. So let's take a closer look at the text. At that time, Michael, the great prince, the protector of your people, shall arise. There shall be a time of anguish, such as has never occurred since nations first came into existence. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky, and those who lead the many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. So here we have this note of resurrection, that there's going to be a time of anguish, but at that time there is also going to be deliverance. So in the midst of the suffering that is happening in the world, there is going to be a deliverance that happens. And then you have this line, points us to the resurrection. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. And so you have this hope for readers today that we can look beyond the current circumstances that we find ourselves in towards God's promise as captured here in Daniel 12. There's going to be a deliverance. And we're going to come awake to what God is doing. God's work is not stopped by what might be happening in the midst of anguish, in the midst of suffering. But God is going to be there, delivering in the midst of whatever is happening. And this is kind of a strange text, right? This is very kind of end times, apocalyptic is the word that is used. And there is some debate among scholars as to why this language is so popular. And during the prophetic times, even into 200 BCE, even in Jesus' time, as we see in Mark's Gospel, prophetic language, apocalyptic language has some mainstay. It's a very interesting topic for people at this time. And one of the reasons we can kind of think about this is that in the midst of our own suffering, in the midst of what is systemic oppression, in the midst of an empire that is dominating and subjugating people to horrendous things, there is a hope that somehow this would be flipped on its head. Whatever is happening might be flipped on its head. And so this language is very strong, there's lots of imagery, and it helps kind of us rethink and reimagine whatever situation that we're going through, that something dramatic might happen to kind of reverse and change the course of what is happening in our lives. And we also see from this text that these human kingdoms have a pattern. As the vision of Daniel ends, it ends with an arrogant king coming to ruin. Well, if we look at human history, human kingdoms tend to come to an end at some point in time. And so it's pointing us to a question. Where do we put our hope? Is our hope in the human kingdoms, the governments, the ruling authorities who have a pattern in human history to come to an end, to come to ruin? Or is our hope found in God's promise? God's promise in Daniel is a glimpse of this resurrection, this deliverance. And it's a strong proclamation as Israel is in exile in Babylon. And even in the chaos and the suffering that they're enduring, God is promising to bring a deliverance. Daniel is pointing us to the reality that God has not abandoned us. Whatever is going on does not have the last word in our lives. But hope does. Hope in God's promise, the only one who goes beyond human kingdoms, the only thing that can, is God. So where do we focus our attention? Where do we look for hope? Is it in the human things, the human kingdoms, the human traditions? Or is it in the one, God, who promises to deliver us from all things? Blessings to you as you prepare for worship this week.